So today I am joined by Kaylee, who is a pediatric speech language pathologist. And prior to that, she got her education in early childhood education, right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah. Do you want to say a couple words just to introduce yourself and your background?
Sure. I'm Kaylee. I am a speech language pathologist, and I currently work with kiddos as young as 12 months, 15 months, and all the way up to age 18 right now. So I
Oh,
do
wow.
home visits, and I also work in an outpatient clinic at a local children's hospital. Yeah.
Oh, welcome.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the first question I had was like, just for parents in general, how can they tell if their child is on track for language development in the first year of life?
Okay. So in the first year of life, we are looking mostly for children to show what we call pre-linguistic skills. And so we're looking for how do they pay attention to us? We're looking for when they start babbling. We're looking for when they start using gestures and pointing. And there's a lot of these pre-linguistic skills that we can look for and that your pediatrician will look out for as well during your well visits. And then the big thing that is kind of easier to remember is their first word should come around their first birthday.
You mentioned gestures. What do you think about using sign language as it's almost like a form of gestures in that pre-linguistic phase?
Sign language is awesome. The research supports sign language, and it's just a really awesome way for babies to learn to self regulate and try to use words before they can verbally imitate you. So, motor imitation, which sign language, if they're going to do more, something like that. Sorry, my other hand is on my phone. If they are able to start motor imitation, that's awesome because motor imitation precedes verbal imitation. And so, yeah, sign language is just really, really awesome. A way that you can prime them to use sign language is have them imitate other motor things first. So that might
Mm.
be like banging on the table. If you're doing something silly, like putting something on your head, see if they'll like put their hands on their head, and then see if they can start approximating some of those signs like they would for more, or something like that. And if it's not perfect, that's okay because babies can actually babble signs too. So if it doesn't
Oh,
come,
wow.
yeah, if it doesn't come out perfectly right away, don't worry because sign language is a language. So they're going to babble their signs just like we would babble sounds in our language.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. So I
Yeah.
noticed some sounds develop later than others, and so babies
Hmm.
struggle with those sounds initially.
Yep.
So that makes
Mhm.
total sense that with signing too, they would be babbling.
Yeah, yeah. And so sign language is it's just really great. And what most parents see happening, unless they want their child to be bilingual and keep up with American Sign Language and spoke English or whatever the language is that they're teaching their child, most babies tend to drop that sign as they start speaking more. But it's just a really great way to reduce frustration. And yeah, I highly recommend sign language.
Awesome. So, what are some fun and easy ways that parents can support babies' language learning, like things that people can add into the routine of their day?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that parents can do is follow your child's lead. So tune into what they're looking at, tune into what they are attentive to, and go with it. So research tells us that if a child is looking at a dog, for example, the most important factor in learning language is timing. So if a child's looking at a dog and pointing to a dog, and the parent is like, let's get in the car, and doesn't
Hmm.
tune into that opportunity to learn the word dog, we just kind of miss that opportunity. So that's a super simple thing that you can incorporate when you're playing with them. If they're staring at a fan as they're laying on the floor like they do for tummy time, you might go up to the fan and pull the string and do on, off, same with the lights, on, off, like literally whatever they're looking at, just tune into your baby and follow their lead and teach the language from that. Same thing with their toys. If you notice that they love certain rattles or certain balls or anything like that, that's an awesome, easy way to teach language because you already have their attention, and you have to have attention in order to learn anything. So
yeah. I remember you created that really great graphic of attention span through different ages, and some of
yeah,
them were really surprisingly short. So it sounds like timing is the key, following their lead and capitalizing on when their attention's already focused on something and using language around
yep,
that thing that they're focused on.
exactly. Exactly. Because a child, if we want to attend a child's attention span to do something that we want them to do, like an adult directed activity, we first have to increase their attention span for a child led or child directed activity. So following their lead is so important.
Okay. Yeah, and that kind of makes me realize too the importance of paying attention to what your kid is doing. Because I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
half the time I'm like on my phone or something like that. I'm probably missing out on all these opportunities when they're naturally focused, and I could bring in language around that.
Well, it's interesting. You might like notice sometimes I'll see videos of like other babies and we don't notice things that we're doing, but we can see it on other people because we're the observer, right? It's different
Yeah.
if you're in the moment, but when you're the observer, like I was talking to a friend, she sent us a video and I was like, oh my gosh, he just said like 2 words right there. And she's like, wait, what? No, he doesn't talk. I'm like, no, he is shaking that bottle and he's taking the things out and he's saying, ow. And she didn't realize that that's a harder vowel to say. For example, he was saying out because she was saying out. And she was following his lead. She was doing a beautiful job. And she was saying in and out, and he was imitating her, but she just didn't realize that that's what he was saying. He was imitating her. So it's
Mhm.
interesting if you follow their lead and pay attention to what they're doing and what they're interested in and what you're doing and saying too. A lot of times they're going to copy us.
Mhm. Mhm. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Um, what's one or two favorite activities you like to do with your own son to encourage his language learning?
So I have a little boy and he's a very active little guy. So we do a lot of like rough and tumble play, a lot of sports, a lot of throwing balls, a lot of hitting balls, kicking balls. So we are always working on action words these days. But kind of going back to the attention a little bit, a child is going to pay attention to you first and your words. So if you're like singing or anything like that, before they can shift their attention between you and a toy. So think about that. So if your child's having a hard time paying attention, ditch the toys and make yourself super silly, super fun, sing, get really interactive with them, and then bring in the toys. But yeah, obviously, since he's 2.5 now, we do a lot of play with toys as well. He's super into monster trucks. So ready, set, go. I think go was his very first word. He's always loved vehicles. We're super into playing games right now, which is fun to add a little bit of like turn taking and asking and answering questions. But yeah, lots and lots of motor activities for sure in my household right now.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. What kind of games do you play? I'm super interested in that now because I'm starting to incorporate games with my daughter as
Yeah.
well.
Oh yeah. So one of our favorites is Zingo. You like slide this little bingo slot machine and words come out. So it's a great opportunity to ask questions, label, and then you match up the pictures and you try to get a bingo. So he likes that one. He's into Pop the Pig. That's a fun one where there's like little hamburgers you feed a pig. Um, and then we actually just started playing Connect Four. He doesn't understand like the principle of it, but he loves putting the things in. So it's a good opportunity for turn taking and like colors and, counting and things like that.
Yeah, we just got Connect Four too. That's such a good reminder that it's not like necessarily following the rules of the game at that age, but just the skills you develop just like
Yeah.
putting it in and talking about what you're doing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep.
And for the early kids, what I really like what you said earlier is that like you yourself are kind of the toy, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you as the parent are the first quote unquote object that the kid
Yep.
learns from. So you don't need a lot of fancy things in that early
Right.
like first year, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. Um, you can turn language into anything that you're doing. You can pull out a pot and a pan and a wooden spoon and you can do bang 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 like the motor imitation we talked about. You can stir, see if they imitate that action. You can put the pot on your head, hat, just teaching them to be flexible with objects and using what you have is a great place to start.
As your kids get a little bit older and they become toddlers and they're starting to use words, how do you recommend teaching them verbiage around feelings and emotions so they can develop those social skills with other toddlers and be able to probably be less frustrated?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So the first feelings book that I like to use, like as young as 6 months, is Karen Katz. Are you familiar with her as an author? She does all of those, like, Where is Baby's Christmas Present? Where is Baby's? It's like a lot of those lift the flap books.
Oh, okay.
They're board books, but Karen Katz, she has a book called How Does Baby Feel? And that's a great one because the language is so simple and babies love the pictures and you lift the flap. It's like, baby wants milk and cookies. How does baby feel? Baby is hungry. Baby dropped her toy. How does baby feel? Baby is sad. So just like starting so young to show the facial expressions and show the child, oh, reaching for cookie, oh, hungry, oh, crying, sad, and pointing out the pictures and making it as visual and concrete for them as possible. Because sometimes feelings can be abstract. So I love using books. I love using pictures. In the moment when they're feeling a certain way, if you can talk to them, I know sometimes it's like hard if they're mad or, but once they calm down, you're feeling mad, lots and lots of weight and pausing in there to allow them to process the language. We want to stay at their level and not overwhelm their little brains with too much language at one time, especially if it's a new concept. You're feeling mad, your toy broke, or you're feeling mad, you can't have ice cream for breakfast, and helping them to feel validated in their feelings and presenting like an opportunity or a solution, or we can try that again next time, or maybe dad can fix it, or we can have ice cream another day, and not letting them think that it's the end of the world, and just validating their feelings, I think, is important.
That's so interesting because it's like you kind of acknowledged almost what you don't want to acknowledge. Like with my toddler, if she wants something like the ice cream and she keeps asking for it, I guess my natural impulse is to like brush it aside, almost like don't acknowledge that she's asking for it because I think she'll fixate on it more. But you're saying actually to call it out and say, oh, you want ice cream, and acknowledge that that's how they're feeling.
I mean, easier said than done, right? Because sometimes it's like, if I don't answer them, they're just gonna like, if they stop pushing the button and nothing happens, maybe they'll stop pushing the button. I mean, I know it's like so hard, but sometimes it's like, okay, if that's not working, let's try something else. So sometimes if we tell them like, you're mad, you want ice cream for breakfast. Ice cream is not on the menu for breakfast this morning, but we can have it after dinner tonight. You set the rule, or you validate that feeling and let them know that like they're heard, because that just helps them be like, okay, yeah, mom gets it, because I like to think of it, someone explained it to me as like, what's a big deal to your little kid? They want the ice cream right then and there. And what's a big deal to me? So if I came home and something was a huge deal to me and someone made me mad at work and my husband just like brushed it off or ignored me, I'd be really mad. Like I'd want him to validate my feeling. So it's kind of like the same with our toddlers. Like how can we emotionally support them and help guide them through that process? Kind of like I would want my husband to do for me,
Right. Right. And it sounds like even if we need to set a boundary around that, it's still important to name and give words to what they're feeling and at least acknowledge that.
Yep. Acknowledge and set the boundary for sure.
Thank you. Well, I just have one last question. When do you recommend starting to read books? Because, obviously children don't learn how to read for a long time, but when should you start? And are there any specific ways that you should start reading to a young baby?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I like to recommend starting to read books as soon as they are awake because there's not much that you can do with a newborn. I mean, you can cuddle them and sing to them, of course, but books are just an easy built-in way to interact with them and start showing them pictures. And when you are reading books, it's good to use a sing-songy intonation. It's good to use repetitive books that have like predictable patterns. Like Good Night Moon is a good one.
Oh, I love
Um,
that one. Yes.
yeah, like The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Still Hungry, books that are like kind of repetitive. Um, but yeah, so using a sing-songy voice, repetitive books. As they get a little older, the more you read to them the same books, you can do a great strategy that I like to do with some of the kids I see in speech therapy, which is a fill in the blank strategy. It's like, um,
Oh,
so for Goodnight Moon, it's like in the great green room, there was and my son will always say telephone in a red balloon. He can like fill in the blanks. And it's a way to like quite literally pull the words out of them because they have that context and it's so familiar to them that it's an easy way to learn more vocabulary.
that's brilliant. It was interesting. I studied linguistics as one of my majors in
Oh,
college.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And one of the things they taught us was that the sing-song voice, like the
Mhm.
pattern of how the tone varies, matches like
Mhm.
the natural changes in the grammatical structure of the language.
Yeah.
So it's like you're teaching them grammar just like without you even having to consciously think about it.
Exactly, exactly, because they're automatically learning like where words separate in sentences. So the words are going to be easier for them to comprehend and make it part of their own vocabulary.
Thank you. I learned a ton from you today, so thank you so much
Good,
for being on
good.
here. If
Thank
people
you.
wanted to find you and learn more from you, what's the best way that they can find you?
Probably through my Instagram, which is at Learn with Chatterboxes.
Great, thank you. And you have an email list that people can sign up for as well, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, and then you also make these awesome language learning kits, which my own daughter has been playing with, and she's been really, really into it, playing with it every day since we got it to
Oh,
help
good.
like
That's good.
craft facial expressions and
Yeah.
use the
Are
words
all
to
the
describe
feels
them.
kit. Yeah, that's great. Yep. We have an All the Feels kit available right now. We have a first words kit, but then recently I started turning all of the kits that I previously did into like a digital resource version so that parents, if they have a lot of these things at home, they have ideas for how to teach their child these concepts at home with like tips or teaching tips and evidence-based tricks and online resources with a book list from YouTube that they don't even have to go out and buy books because I did the homework for them, interactive
That's
games,
awesome.
things like that. So yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I can't wait to dive into that more.